They landed at 10:30 on a Thursday night, tanned and laughing, dragging monogrammed luggage through the front door like they just returned from some kind of triumph. My brother Tyler shook rain from his jacket, still wearing his Barcelona FC cap, grinning at our mother like they just pulled off the heist of the century. My father, Robert, looked better than he had in months, his color back, his shoulders loose like the Mediterranean sun had erased every bit of the surgery, the pain, the 3 weeks he'd spent barely able to climb the stairs. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood in the hallway holding a damp dish towel, flour still under my fingernails from the bread I'd been baking because Dad could only eat soft foods and the store-bought kind hurt his throat. There was a suitcase by my feet, small and olive green, the one I'd packed 2 months ago when they first told me about the trip. The one that never made it past the coat closet. Tyler dropped his bag and crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling me into a hug that smelled like airport cologne and something sweet I didn't recognize. You're a legend," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seriously, we owe you big time." I didn't hug him back. I just stood there, arms slack, staring past his shoulder at my mother, Linda, who was pulling a silk scarf from her neck, smiling like she'd just come home from book club, not a 10-day European vacation that cost more than my car. "How was he?" she asked brightly, as if I'd been house-sitting, not keeping her husband alive. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "He had a bad night on Tuesday. His heart rate spiked." I called the on-call nurse. She talked me through it. My voice came out flat, mechanical, like I was reading from a script I'd rehearsed too many times. "He's been stable since then. Sleeping better. Eating a little more." Linda nodded, already moving toward the kitchen, heels clicking on the hardwood. Good. I knew you'd manage. You've always been so capable with these things." These things, like monitoring someone's pulse at 3 in the morning, was the same as watering plants or sorting mail. Like I hadn't spent 72 hours wondering if I should call an ambulance, if I'd made the right choice, if my father would wake up the next morning. Tyler clapped me on the shoulder, still grinning. "We brought you something," he said, pulling a small bag from his carry-on. Inside was a keychain, bright red and yellow, the Barcelona crest stamped on cheap metal. "Figured you'd want a souvenir." I looked at the keychain, then at him, then at the luggage, the tans, the easy laughter, the way none of them had even asked if I was okay. And something inside me that had been bending for years finally snapped clean in half. My name is Emma Richardson. I'm 36 years old, and up until that moment I thought being the dependable one meant I mattered. Turns out, it just meant I was the one they didn't have to think about. The one who'd always say yes. The one who'd hold everything together while they went off and lived. But here's the thing they didn't know. While they were sipping sangria in Los Ramblas and taking selfies in front of Gaudi's Basilica, I'd been doing more than just checking vitals and microwaving soup. I'd been organizing. My father had asked me to pull together his medical files, to create a timeline for the new cardiologist, to make sure nothing was missed. And when I opened that filing cabinet in his study, when I started sorting through the insurance statements and the hospital bills and the payment records, I found something they never meant for me to see. The trip was supposed to be for 2 people. My parents. Their 40th anniversary. They'd been planning it for 3 years, saving up, talking about it every Sunday dinner like it was some kind of pilgrimage. Then Dad got sick. Emergency surgery. 6 weeks of recovery. And suddenly the trip was in jeopardy. I remember the conversation. We were all sitting in the living room, Dad still pale and weak in his recliner, Mom perched on the armrest holding his hand. Tyler had driven up from Portland, taking the afternoon off work, which he made sure we all knew was a huge sacrifice. "We can't go," Mom had said quietly, staring at the tickets on the coffee table like they were something fragile. "Not with your father like this. It wouldn't be right." I'd looked at those tickets, at the dates printed in crisp black ink, and felt something flutter in my chest. Hope maybe. Or just the tiniest whisper of possibility. Because there were 2 tickets. And if they weren't going? What if I stayed with Dad? I'd said. The words came out small, uncertain. "You 2 could still go. I work from home anyway. I could be here full-time. Make sure he's okay." Mom had looked at me, then at Tyler, then back at Dad. There was a pause, long and heavy, the kind that makes you realize a decision is being made without you. Tyler cleared his throat. Actually, I was thinking the same thing. But, maybe a little different. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, doing that thing he always did when he was about to sell someone on an idea. What if Mom and I went? Dad's pretty out of it right now anyway, no offense, Pops. He probably won't even notice who's here. And Emma's better with the medical stuff. She's organized. Detail-oriented. She'd catch things I'd miss. I'd stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for someone to laugh, to say obviously that wasn't what we meant. But no one laughed. Mom had nodded slowly. That actually makes sense. Robert, what do you think? Dad had looked at me. Really looked at me. And for just a second I thought he'd say something. Thought he'd tell them no, that was ridiculous, that if anyone deserved to use that second ticket it was me. But he was tired. So tired. And when you're that tired you just want the problem solved. You want someone else to decide. Whatever works, he'd murmured, closing his eyes. I just need to sleep. And that was it. Decision made. Tyler got the vacation. I got the bedpans and the pill organizers and the 3 a.m. panic attacks. They told me the tickets were non-transferable, that they'd already checked, that there was nothing they could do. They told me I was saving the day, that I was so good at this kind of thing, that they'd make it up to me. I'd smiled, nodded, said of course, no problem, I'm happy to help, because that's what I always did. I made it easy for them to choose someone else. But now, standing in that hallway with a Barcelona keychain in my hand and my brother's arm still around my shoulders, I wasn't smiling anymore. I was thinking about the filing cabinet, about the papers I'd found, about the account statements that showed exactly how those tickets got paid for. The house settled into its old rhythms quickly, like the trip had never happened. Tyler stayed for 2 more days working remotely. From the guest room, taking calls on the back deck while I reheated the casseroles neighbors had dropped off weeks ago. Mom threw herself into unpacking, reorganizing the linen closet, making lists of thank you notes she needed to write to people who'd asked about Dad. Nobody asked about me. Nobody asked how those 3 weeks had been. Nobody seemed to notice the dark circles under my eyes or the way my hands shook slightly when I poured coffee, or the fact that I'd lost 8 pounds because I kept forgetting to eat. On Saturday morning I made pancakes. Dad was strong enough to come downstairs now, moving slowly but steadily, and he sat at the kitchen table in his usual spot, reading the paper on his tablet, occasionally commenting on something he found interesting. Mom flipped through a photo album she'd already shown me twice, pointing out restaurants and museums and a street performer who'd done something apparently hilarious with a rubber chicken. Tyler scrolled through his phone, half listening, occasionally showing us a picture. I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, watching them. They looked like a family. Happy. Whole. Connected. And I looked like the help. Emma, these are perfect, Dad said, cutting into his stack. You've been taking such good care of me. I forced a smile. Just doing what needed to be done. Well, we appreciate it, Mom added, not looking up from her photos. It's such a relief knowing you were here. I don't think I could have enjoyed the trip otherwise. Something in my chest tightened. Right. Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Tyler glanced up. You okay? You seem weird. I turned back to the stove. I'm fine. Just tired. You should take a vacation, he said, completely serious. Get away for a bit. Recharge. The spatula in my hand pressed hard against the pan. I counted to 5. Then 10. Yeah, maybe I will. After preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Breakfast, Tyler packed up his car, hugged everyone, told me again that I was amazing, and drove back to Portland with promises to visit again soon. Mom went to run errands. Dad retreated to his recliner for his afternoon nap. And I stood in the kitchen alone again, staring at the stack of dishes and the leftover pancakes and the keychain still sitting on the counter where I'd left it. I picked up my phone, opened my photos, scrolled back to the pictures I'd taken 3 days ago, the ones I'd almost deleted a dozen times because looking at them made me feel sick. Screenshots, bank statements, medical billing records, all from the filing cabinet in Dad's study, the one I'd been organizing like he'd asked. The trust fund. The one Grandma Richardson had set up before she died. The one that was supposed to cover Dad's medical expenses and be split between Tyler and me after everything was settled. $280,000. It had been sitting there for 5 years untouched, earning interest, waiting. Until 6 months ago. That's when the withdrawals started. Small at first. A few thousand here and there for medical equipment, prescriptions, copays. All legitimate. All necessary. But then the amounts got bigger. And the descriptions got vaguer. Family expense. Emergency disbursement. Medical consultation abroad. I'd pulled the trust documents. Read them twice. Dad was the primary trustee. But after his surgery, after he'd been declared temporarily incapacitated by his doctors, someone else had to take over. Someone had to have signing authority to keep paying the bills, to keep things moving. That someone was Tyler. And Tyler had approved every single withdrawal, including the one from 8 weeks ago. $12,000. Marked family medical travel expense. I'd stared at that line for a long time, my brain trying to make it make sense, trying to find an explanation that didn't feel like betrayal. Maybe it was for Dad. Maybe there was some specialist they'd consulted. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Then I'd found the email. It was in Dad's inbox, forwarded from Tyler. The subject line said, Barcelona confirmation. Inside was an itinerary, 2 business-class tickets, upgraded seats, travel insurance, a 5-star hotel in the Gothic Quarter. Total cost, $8,500. The rest, I assumed, went to meals, tours, spending money. The kind of comfortable cushion that turns a vacation into something luxurious. They'd paid for it with the trust. With money that was supposed to keep Dad alive. Money that was supposed to be protected. Money that Tyler was supposed to be safeguarding, not spending on sangria and paella. And they told me they couldn't afford 2 tickets. I stood there in the kitchen, phone in my hand, and felt something shift. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about who people are. I scrolled through my contacts, past the usual names, past the family group chat I'd muted weeks ago, down to a name I hadn't looked at in over a year. Sophie Martinez. Tyler's ex-fiancée. The woman my family had spent 2 years pretending didn't exist. They'd been together for 4 years. Engaged for 6 months. Sophie was smart, kind, worked as a social worker with kids in foster care. She laughed loud and didn't take herself too seriously, and had this way of making everyone around her feel seen. I'd liked her. Really liked her. We'd gotten coffee a few times, just the 2 of us, talked about books and work, and what it was like being part of this family. Then Tyler broke it off. No warning. No real explanation. Just came home one Sunday and told us it wasn't working out, that they wanted different things, that it was mutual and amicable and everyone should move on. But I'd seen Sophie's face at the family barbecue 2 weeks later. The one Tyler had insisted she come to for closure. She'd looked gutted. Confused. Like she'd been expecting a conversation and got a verdict instead. And when I tried to talk to her to ask if she was okay, Mom had pulled me aside and said it was better not to get involved. That Tyler knew what was best for himself. That Sophie was lovely, but sometimes people just weren't the right fit. I'd nodded. Stayed quiet. Let Sophie disappear from our lives like she'd never been there. But I'd kept her number. Now, standing in the kitchen with the weight of 3 weeks and $12,000 and a Barcelona keychain pressing down on me, I opened her contact. Stared at it. My thumb hovered over the call button. What was I even going to say? Hi, remember me, the sister of the guy who dumped you? Want to hear about how he stole from our dying father? But then I thought about the way Mom had waved off my question about the tickets. The way Tyler had laughed and called me a legend. The way Dad had just closed his eyes and let them decide. The way nobody had asked if I was okay. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. Then a cautious voice answered. Hello. Sophie. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. It's Emma. Emma Richardson. There was a pause. Long enough that I almost hung up. Then, Emma. Wow. Hi. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I know. I'm sorry. I know this is weird. I pressed my palm against the counter, steadying myself. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. Another pause. Okay. When Tyler ended things. When he called off the engagement. I took a breath. Was it really mutual? The silence stretched. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her deciding whether to tell me the truth or give me the easy answer. Finally, she spoke. No. It wasn't mutual. He told me the family didn't think I was good enough. That your mom had concerns about my job, my background. That he needed to prioritize what they wanted. Her voice cracked slightly. He said he couldn't marry someone his family didn't respect. My eyes closed. Sophie, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I should have said something. I should have reached out. Emma. Why are you calling me now? I looked down at my phone at the screenshot still open, at the evidence of everything they'd done. Because I think you deserve to know who he really is. And because I need help. And because I'm done being quiet. I met Sophie 2 days later at a coffee shop in Beaverton, halfway between her apartment and my parents' house. It was one of those gray October mornings where the rain hadn't started yet, but you could feel it coming, the air thick and heavy with the promise of it. I got there early, ordered a tea I didn't drink, and sat by the window watching people hurry past with their heads down and their shoulders hunched against the cold. When Sophie walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it darker, and there was something different in the way she carried herself. Harder, maybe. More guarded. She spotted me immediately, raised a hand in a small wave and made her way over. Hey, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. She ordered nothing, just folded her hands on the table and looked at me with those same warm brown eyes I remembered, except now they were cautious. Careful. So, this is happening. Thanks for coming, I said. I wasn't sure you would. Honestly, I almost didn't. She exhaled slowly. But you sounded different on the phone. Like something had changed. Something did. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder I'd created, and slid it across the table. Sophie picked it up, scrolling slowly through the screenshots, her expression shifting from confusion to surprise to something darker. She read carefully, methodically, taking her time with each image. When she finally looked up, her jaw was tight. He used your father's medical trust to pay for a vacation. Him and my mother. Yes. While you stayed home and took care of your dad. For 3 weeks. Alone. Yes. Sophie set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, staring at nothing. I want to say I'm shocked. But I'm really not. She rubbed her face with both hands. Do you know why he really broke up with me, Emma? The real reason? You said the family didn't approve. That's what he told me. But I found out later it was about money. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she'd processed this a long time ago and all that was left was the truth. Your grandmother's trust. Tyler knew it was coming. Knew he'd eventually have access to it once your dad either passed or became unable to manage it himself. And he didn't want to split it with a spouse. He wanted full control. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He told you that? Not directly, but I pieced it together. He started acting weird about 6 months before the breakup, asking strange questions about whether I'd want a prenup, how I felt about joint accounts, whether I thought family money should stay in the family. I thought he was just being thoughtful, planning ahead. She laughed bitterly. Turns out he was calculating. Sophie, I'm sorry. I had no idea. How could you? He's good at this. At making people think he's the responsible one, the smart one, the one who has everything figured out. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something in her expression softened. But you're different. You always were. You actually gave a damn about people. I didn't know what to say to that. I picked up my tea, realized it had gone cold, set it back down. I need to know something. When you were with him, did you ever meet his financial advisor? Or see any paperwork about the trust? Sophie frowned, thinking. Once. We were at your parents' house for dinner. Maybe a year before the breakup. Tyler and your dad were in the study for a while going over some documents. Your mom made a comment about how nice it was that Tyler was taking an interest in the family finances, being responsible. I remember thinking it was sweet. That he was stepping up. Do you remember anything specific? Any names, any details? There was a folder. Dark blue. It had a law firm's name on it. Something with initials. She closed her eyes, trying to recall. Morrison and Associates, maybe? No, wait. Mitchell and Associates. That was it. I wrote it down. Anything else? Your dad seemed uncomfortable. Like he didn't really want to be having the conversation but felt like he had to. Tyler kept saying things like we need to make sure everything's protected, make sure the right people have access. At the time I thought he was being considerate. Now I think he was positioning himself. He got himself named as trustee. Probably. And if he did it while your dad was already starting to decline, while everyone was worried about the health stuff, nobody would have questioned it. They would have been relieved someone was handling it. Sophie leaned forward. Emma, what are you going to do with this? I don't know yet. That's why I called you. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Whether this is just morally wrong or actually illegal. It's both. Sophie's voice was firm. If he used trust funds for personal expenses, that's misappropriation. If he did it while acting as trustee, it's a breach of fiduciary duty. And if your dad was mentally compromised when Tyler took over the trust, there could be questions about whether the transfer of authority was even valid. You sound like a lawyer. I work with enough of them. You pick things up. She drummed her fingers on the table. Do you have copies of the trust documents? The original ones showing how it was set up? They're in my dad's filing cabinet. I saw them when I was organizing everything. You need to make copies. Photograph every page. Do it quietly when no one's home. And then you need to talk to someone who specializes in elder law or trust litigation. I don't know any lawyers like that. Sophie pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and wrote something on a napkin. David Chun. He's based in Portland, handles a lot of family law and estate stuff. Tell him I sent you. He's good, and he's not afraid to go after people who abuse their authority. I took the napkin, folded it carefully, and put it in my pocket. Why are you helping me? She smiled sad and knowing. Because nobody helped me when I needed it. Because I know what it's like to realize the people you thought loved you were really just using you. And because maybe if enough of us stop staying quiet, people like Tyler don't get to keep winning. We sat there for a while longer talking about smaller things, catching up on the years we'd missed. Sophie told me about her job, about a case she just closed involving a teenager who'd been bounced between 7 foster homes before finally finding stability. I told her about my graphic design work, about the contracts I'd been taking, the clients I was building. It felt normal, easy, like we were just two people who'd known each other once and were rediscovering why they'd liked each other in the first place. When we finally left, Sophie hugged me. Not a polite family gathering hug, but a real one, tight and fierce. Be careful, she said quietly. Your brother's not going to take this well. And your mom's going to protect him. You know that, right? I know. Good. Because you can't go into this expecting them to suddenly see reason or feel guilty or do the right thing. People like that don't change. They just get better at justifying what they've already decided is okay. I watched her walk away, hands shoved in her coat pockets, disappearing into the morning crowd. Then I got in my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the napkin with David Chin's number on it. 3 days later, my dad had a follow-up appointment with his cardiologist. Mom was supposed to take him, but she called that morning and said something had come up with her book club, some emergency planning meeting for their annual fundraiser, and could I possibly handle it? Just this once? It would mean so much. I said yes. As I always said yes. The appointment went well. Dad's heart was healing, his numbers were good. The doctor was pleased with his progress. On the way home he was quiet, staring out the window at the gray sky and the wet roads, lost in whatever thoughts occupied him these days. You've been good to me, Emma, he said suddenly. These past few weeks. I know it wasn't easy. It's okay, Dad. I wanted to help. Still, you put your life on hold. That's not nothing. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother and Tyler, they don't always see things clearly. They get focused on what they think needs to happen and forget to consider what's fair. I kept my eyes on the road. What do you mean? The trip. The tickets. I know you wanted to go. I saw your face when we were talking about it. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. It's fine. Really. It's not fine. But I was too tired to fight about it. Too tired to push back. And I'm sorry for that. Something in my chest loosened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Proof that I hadn't imagined it, that someone had seen what happened and knew it was wrong. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. The trust. Grandma's trust. Who's managing it right now? He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Tyler took over when I had the surgery. I couldn't handle the paperwork, couldn't focus on the details. He said he'd take care of everything, make sure the bills got paid. Did you sign anything? Transfer any authority officially? There were some forms. My lawyer brought them to the hospital. Tyler was there, helped me understand what they were for. Why? I was just curious. Organizing your files, I saw some of the statements. Wanted to make sure I understood how everything worked. Dad nodded slowly. Tyler's good with numbers. Always has been. I trust him to do right by the family. I didn't say anything. Didn't tell him about the $12,000 or the Barcelona itinerary, or the way that trust had been gutted to fund someone else's happiness. I just drove, watching the familiar streets slide past, and wondered how many times he'd chosen to trust Tyler over seeing what was actually there. That night, after I'd gotten Dad settled and Mom had come home and made her usual rounds of checking on things and rearranging what didn't need rearranging, I went back to my apartment. It was small, too small probably, but it was mine. The walls were covered in prints I'd collected over the years, illustrations and paintings and photographs that reminded me of places I'd never been and lives I'd never lived. My desk sat by the window, covered in sketches and half-finished projects and coffee mugs I kept forgetting to wash. I made tea, real tea this time, and sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, pulled up the contact information Sophie had given me. David Chin's website was simple, professional. Family law, estate planning, trust litigation. His bio mentioned 15 years of experience, a degree from Lewis and Clark, a reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive advocacy. There were testimonials from clients who'd been helped, problems that had been solved, justice that had been achieved. I hovered over the contact form for a long time. Typed a message. Deleted it. Typed another one. Deleted that too. What was I even doing? Was I really going to accuse my own brother of theft? Drag my family through some legal battle? Expose everything to lawyers and courts and public record? But then I thought about the 3 weeks I'd spent alone, checking vitals and crushing pills and lying awake wondering if every sound was my father's heart giving out. I thought about the keychain, the easy laughter, the way they'd walk through that door like heroes. I thought about Sophie sitting across from me in that coffee shop, telling me about how she'd been calculated out of Tyler's life because she was inconvenient. I thought about my dad in the car, apologizing for being too tired to fight. I typed a third message. This one I didn't delete. My name is Emma Richardson. I believe my brother has been misappropriating funds from a family trust while acting as trustee. I have documentation and would like to schedule a consultation to discuss my options. Please let me know your availability. I hit send before I could change my mind. The reply came the next morning. David Chan could meet with me on Friday at 2. His office was in downtown Portland, 40th floor. Bring any documents I had. No charge for the initial consultation. I confirmed the appointment. Then I waited until noon, when I knew both my parents would be out. Mom had her volunteer shift at the church. Dad had physical therapy. The house would be empty for at least 2 hours. I drove over with a folder and my phone, let myself in with the key they'd never asked me to return. Went straight to Dad's study. The filing cabinet was still organized the way I'd left it, color-coded folders and labeled tabs and everything in chronological order. I found the trust documents in the second drawer, thick and formal and stamped with the law firm's seal. I photographed every page, making sure the images were clear, that every line of text was readable. Then I found the statements, the ones showing the withdrawals, the ones with Tyler's signature authorizing each transfer. I photographed those too. There was a folder I'd missed before, tucked in the back behind some old tax returns. Inside were emails printed out and paper-clipped together, correspondence between Tyler and the trust administrator, requests for access, authorizations for payments. And there in the middle of the stack was a form I hadn't seen before. A power of attorney document, granting Tyler full authority over Dad's financial affairs, signed 2 days after the surgery when Dad was still on heavy pain medication and barely conscious. I stared at it for a long time, at the signature that didn't quite look like Dad's usual handwriting, at the date, at the witness line, signed by someone whose name I didn't recognize. I took pictures of everything. Every email, every form, every statement. And then I put it all back exactly the way I'd found it, closed the drawer and left. Friday came fast. I dressed carefully, professionally, like I was going to a job interview instead of potentially blowing up my entire family. Drove to Portland through rain that came down steady and gray. Found parking 3 blocks from the building and walked the rest of the way. My folder tucked under my jacket to keep it dry. David Chin's office was exactly what I'd expected. Clean, organized, walls lined with law books and framed degrees. He was younger than I'd imagined, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He offered me coffee. I declined. We sat down across from each other at a large oak desk, and he folded his hands and waited for me to begin. I told him everything. About the trip, the trust, the withdrawals, the power of attorney that didn't look right. I showed him the photographs, walked him through the timeline, explained the family dynamics as clearly as I could. He listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, his expression neutral and professional. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "This is a strong case. If what you're telling me is accurate, and if these documents support it, your brother has committed multiple violations of his fiduciary duty as trustee. The personal use of trust funds alone is grounds for removal and potential criminal charges. The questionable power of attorney adds another layer. What would happen if we moved forward? We'd file a petition with the probate court to remove your brother as trustee and conduct a full accounting of the trust. We'd request an investigation into the power of attorney, potentially challenge its validity. If we can prove the funds were misused, we can seek restitution, which means your brother would have to pay back everything he took. Depending on the amount and the circumstances, there could also be criminal exposure for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. My father's not vulnerable. He's recovering. He was vulnerable when the power of attorney was signed. He was post-surgery on medication, possibly not in a state to make informed decisions. That matters legally. I felt something heavy settle in my stomach. This would destroy my family. It might. But your brother already did that when he chose to betray the trust placed in him. You're just deciding whether to let him get away with it. David leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. Emma, I need to be very clear about something. If we do this, it's going to get ugly. Your family is going to close ranks. They're going to accuse you of being vindictive, of misunderstanding, of causing drama. Your brother will hire his own lawyer, and they will fight hard. This could take months, maybe longer. And at the end of it, even if you win, you might lose the relationships anyway. I don't know if I even have those relationships anymore. He nodded slowly. That's something only you can answer. But if you decide to move forward, I want you to know what you're walking into. This isn't just about the money or the principle. It's about choosing yourself over a system that's been set up to make you invisible. I sat with that for a long moment. Thought about the train station in the original story I'd heard. About the woman who'd been handed someone else's children and expected to carry the weight. Thought about Sophie, erased from the family like she'd never mattered. Thought about my father in the car, too tired to fight. Thought about myself, standing in that hallway with a keychain, realizing I'd been made useful instead of loved. What do I need to do next? I asked. David smiled. Not with triumph but with understanding. First, we gather everything. Every document, every statement, every piece of communication. We build the case so thoroughly that there's no room for doubt. Then we file. And then we prepare for them to come at you with everything they have. I can do that. I believe you can. He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. I'm going to need you to compile a timeline. Every withdrawal from the trust, every expense, every conversation you remember about the finances or the trip or your father's care. Dates, amounts, who said what. The more detail, the better. We spent the next hour going through everything, creating a plan, discussing strategy. By the time I left, the rain had stopped and the sky was starting to clear, patches of blue showing through the gray. I walked back to my car feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Like I'd set something down but picked up something else, something I wasn't sure I was ready to carry but knew I couldn't put back. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Jess's place in Beaverton. She was my college roommate, the one person who'd known me before the family dynamics had calcified into their current shape. Before I'd learned to make myself small and useful. She opened the door in paint-stained jeans and an old band t-shirt, took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "What happened?" she asked, leading me to her kitchen. I told her. All of it. The trip, the trust, the meeting with David Chun, the decision I'd made. She listened the way she always had, completely present, asking questions only when something wasn't clear, never once suggesting I was overreacting or being unfair. When I finished, she made us both tea and sat down across from me at her small kitchen table. "You know they're going to lose their minds, right?" "I know. Your mom's going to call you selfish. Tyler's going to say you're jealous. They're going to tell everyone that you've changed, that you're not yourself, that grief has made you unstable." "I know that too." "Good." Jess reached across the table and took my hand. "Because I need you to know something before this starts. You're not crazy. You're not wrong. And you're not alone. Whatever happens, whatever they say, you've got people who see you. Really see you. Not the version they need you to be, but who you actually are." I felt tears start, the first real ones since this whole thing began. "I'm scared." "You should be. This is scary. But you're doing it anyway, and that's what matters." I stayed at Jess's that night, sleeping in her guest room under a quilt her grandmother had made, listening to the sound of rain starting up again outside. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and found Jess already up, working on a painting in her studio. She turned when she heard me, smiled and said, "Ready to build your case?" We spent the weekend organizing everything, creating spreadsheets, compiling documents, building a timeline that showed exactly how the trust had been drained and exactly who had authorized each withdrawal. Jess had a friend who worked in forensic accounting, and she called him, asked questions, learned what to look for. By Sunday night, we had something that looked less like a collection of grievances and more like evidence. On Monday, I sent it all to David Chun. He replied within an hour. "This is excellent work. We're ready to file. I just need your final authorization to proceed." I stared at that email for a long time. My finger hovered over the reply button. This was it. The point of no return. Once I said yes, once those papers were filed, everything would change. My family would know. They would react. And there would be no taking it back. I thought about my father sitting in that car, apologizing for being too tired to fight. I thought about Sophie, pushed out because she was inconvenient. I thought about myself standing in that hallway with a keychain, finally understanding that dependable wasn't the same as valued. I typed 3 words. "Please proceed. Thank you." And then I hit send. The papers were filed on a Wednesday morning. David called me at 9:15 to confirm everything had gone through, that the petition to remove Tyler as trustee and conduct a full accounting was now officially part of the public record. He told me I should expect contact from my family within 24 hours, probably sooner, and that I should be prepared for it to be hostile. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in my apartment waiting for the explosion. It came at 11:30. My phone lit up with Tyler's name. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again immediately. Then again. On the 4th attempt I answered. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the rage underneath it. "I just got served with court papers. At my office, Emma. In front of my colleagues. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I kept my voice steady. "I filed a petition regarding the trust. I have concerns about how it's being managed." "Concerns? You have concerns?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You went behind my back, hired a lawyer, and accused me of stealing from Dad. That's not concerns, that's betrayal." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, using $12,000 of Dad's medical trust to fund your vacation to Barcelona seems a lot more like betrayal." There was silence. Then his voice came back quieter, more dangerous. "You don't know what you're talking about. That money was allocated for family medical expenses. The trip was therapeutic. Mom needed the break. Dad's doctors said reducing her stress would help his recovery. Show me the doctor's note that prescribed a European vacation. Show me where it says business class tickets and 5-star hotels count as medical expenses. You're twisting everything. I'm reading the statements, Tyler. The ones with your signature. The ones that show exactly what you spent and when. I was taking care of the family. Someone had to make the hard decisions while you were playing nursemaid and feeling sorry for yourself. That one landed. I felt it hit, felt the old instinct to back down, to apologize, to make it easier for him. But I didn't. I was taking care of Dad. Alone. For 3 weeks. While you were drinking sangria and taking selfies. We offered to pay you. I actually laughed at that. When? When did you offer to pay me? Before or after you handed me the keychain? This is ridiculous. I'm not doing this with you. His voice shifted, became more formal. I've already talked to my attorney. He says you don't have a case. Says you're reaching, probably acting out because of your own issues. The miscarriage, the isolation, all of it. He thinks we can get this dismissed pretty quickly on the grounds that you're not mentally stable enough to bring a credible complaint. Something cold settled in my chest. You're going to claim I'm mentally unstable. I'm going to tell the truth. That you've been struggling. That you're not thinking clearly. That this is a cry for help, not a legitimate legal action. I have documentation, Tyler. Bank statements, emails, the power of attorney you had Dad sign while he was on pain medication. I have all of it. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Careful. Emma, listen to me. You're my sister. I don't want to hurt you. But if you keep pushing this, I will. I'll do what I have to do to protect myself and this family. I'll bring up the hospitalization after you lost the baby. The medication you were on. The fact that you've been isolated and unstable for months. I'll paint a picture of someone who can't be trusted to understand complex financial matters, and I'll make it stick. Go ahead. Because I'll paint a picture too. Of someone who systematically drained his father's medical trust. Who forged signatures and manipulated documents. Who pushed out his fiancée because she was in the way of his inheritance. And unlike your picture, mine has evidence. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I set the phone down on the table and watched it, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. Instead, 5 minutes later, my mother called. Emma. Sweetheart, what's going on? Her voice was concerned, gentle, the tone she used when she was trying to de-escalate something. Tyler just called me. He's very upset. He said you filed some kind of legal complaint? I did. I filed a petition with the probate court regarding Grandma's trust. Oh, honey. Why would you do that? If you had questions, you could have just asked. We're family. We don't need lawyers and courts and all this drama. I did ask, Mom. I asked about the vacation. I asked how the tickets got paid for. You told me they were non-transferable and that you couldn't afford to. Well, that's true. The original tickets were non-transferable. But you bought new ones. With trust money. While I was taking care of Dad. She sighed, and I could picture her pinching the bridge of her nose, the thing she did when she was disappointed in me. Emma, it's more complicated than that. There were circumstances, considerations you don't fully understand. Then explain them to me. The trust is set up to provide for family welfare. Your father's health, yes, but also the overall well-being of the family unit. I was exhausted, stressed to the point of collapse. The doctors were worried about my blood pressure. Tyler was burning out at work. We needed something to help us recharge so we could be there for your father in the long term. It was a strategic decision. A strategic decision that cost $12,000 and left me alone with Dad for 3 weeks. You said you were happy to help. I said I would do it. That's not the same thing. Emma, you're not seeing this clearly. You've been through so much. The miscarriage, the breakup with Daniel, the isolation. I think all of this has affected your judgment more than you realize. My judgment is fine, Mom. What's affected is my willingness to be convenient. What does that mean? It means I'm done being the person you don't have to think about. The one who'll always say yes. The one who'll carry whatever you hand me and never ask why it's always me doing the carrying. Her voice hardened. That's not fair. We've always appreciated everything you do. But appreciation doesn't mean we owe you control over family finances. Tyler is the trustee. That was decided properly legally. You don't get to override that just because you're feeling neglected. He used Dad's money to fund a vacation, Mom. That's not legal. That's theft. It was not theft. It was a family decision, and you weren't part of that decision because frankly, you've been too fragile to handle these kinds of responsibilities. We were protecting you. By lying to me? By not burdening you with details you didn't need. Emma, I'm asking you nicely. Drop this. Talk to your lawyer. Tell him you made a mistake, and let's handle this as a family. If you keep pushing, you're going to force us to defend ourselves. And that means bringing up things you might not want aired in public. Like what? Like the fact that you were hospitalized. Like the fact that you're on medication. Like the fact that your own therapist has expressed concerns about your decision-making abilities. I felt like I'd been slapped. Dr. Morrison never said that. Are you sure? Because Tyler spoke to her office. They have records. That's confidential. He has no right to access my medical records. He has the right to protect himself from false accusations. And if that means demonstrating that the person making those accusations isn't reliable, then that's what he'll do. I closed my eyes, breathed slowly. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. There's a difference. I love you, Emma. But I love Tyler too. And I will not stand by and watch you destroy his reputation over some misunderstanding about money. It's not a misunderstanding. Then prove it in court. But understand what you're choosing. You're choosing lawyers and judges and public scrutiny over your own family. You're choosing to air our private business for everyone to see. You're choosing to make yourself an outsider. Maybe I already was. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. I hope you know what you're doing. Because once you go down this road, there's no coming back. You'll win or you'll lose, but either way you'll be alone. She hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the wall, feeling the full weight of what I'd set in motion. They weren't going to admit fault. They weren't going to apologize or make it right. They were going to fight, and they were going to fight dirty, and they were going to use everything they had against me. My phone buzzed. A text from Jess. How bad was it? I typed back. Pretty bad. They're going to claim I'm unstable. Her response came immediately. Good thing we have evidence that says otherwise. Want company tonight? I smiled despite everything. Yes, please. She showed up an hour later with Thai food and a bottle of wine. We ate on my couch, watching terrible reality television and not talking about any of it, just existing in the same space without the weight of explanation. Around 9, she turned to me and said, You know they're wrong, right? About you being unstable? Most of the time. Emma, I'm serious. I've known you for 15 years. I was there after the miscarriage. I saw how hard it hit you. But struggling isn't the same as being unstable. Grieving isn't the same as being incompetent. And asking for what you deserve isn't the same as being vindictive. I know. Logically, I know that. But emotionally? Emotionally, I keep wondering if they're right. If I'm doing this because I'm hurt and angry and looking for revenge instead of justice. Jess set down her wine glass and turned to face me fully. Okay, let's play this out. Let's say you are hurt and angry. Let's say some part of this is about feeling invisible and used and undervalued. Does that make what Tyler did okay? Does your emotional state somehow erase the fact that he misused trust funds? No. Does it change the bank statements? The withdrawals? The forged power of attorney? No. Then who cares what your motivation is? You're hurt because something hurtful happened. You're angry because something wrong was done. Those feelings don't invalidate the facts. They're just proof that you're human and you're paying attention. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me you won't let them gaslight you into thinking you're the problem here. Because you're not. You're just the first person who had the guts to say something out loud. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 3 from Tyler, 7 from my mother, 2 from my dad, and 5 from numbers I didn't recognize. There were texts too, dozens of them, ranging from concerned to accusatory to outright hostile. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years wanted to know what was going on. Aunts who'd never particularly liked me anyway were weighing in with their opinions about family loyalty and respect. My mother's best friend from church had somehow gotten my number and sent a long message about forgiveness and Christian values. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded everything to David Chun with a note. This is what's starting. He replied within minutes. Document everything. Save every message, every voicemail, every attempt at contact. If anyone threatens you or tries to intimidate you, let me know immediately. This is all potentially useful. Around noon my dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe I wanted to hear his voice. Maybe I wanted him to tell me he understood. Maybe I just needed to know whether he was on their side or mine. Emma. His voice was tired, strained. Can we talk? I'm listening. Your mother told me about the court filing. About the accusations against Tyler. They're not accusations, Dad. They're documented facts. I don't understand why you're doing this. Why you couldn't just come to me first. Would you have listened? He was quiet. I don't know. Maybe not. I've been tired, Emma. So tired. And it was easier to let Tyler handle things, to trust that he knew what he was doing. He took $12,000 from your medical trust to pay for a vacation, while I stayed home and took care of you. For 3 weeks. Alone. He told me it was for family wellness. That the doctors recommended it. Did you see? Doctor's note? Did anyone actually tell you that Barcelona was medically necessary? Another pause. No. Dad, when you signed the power of attorney, the one that gave Tyler control over the trust, do you remember signing it? Barely. I was in the hospital. Everything was foggy. Did anyone explain what you were signing? Did anyone tell you what authority you were giving him? Tyler said it was just paperwork, so he could pay the medical bills while I was recovering. He said it was temporary. It wasn't temporary, and it wasn't just for medical bills. He's been using it to access the trust for whatever he wants. And when I asked questions, he told me I was mentally unstable. Mom threatened to expose my medical records if I didn't drop the case. I heard him breathe in sharply. She said that? Yes. Emma, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have paid more attention. Should have asked more questions. You were sick, Dad. You were trying to survive. I don't blame you for that. But you blame Tyler. I blame Tyler for lying. For stealing. For manipulating you when you were vulnerable. And I blame Mom for enabling him and threatening me when I called it out. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him processing, trying to reconcile the family he thought he had with the one that was revealing itself. What happens now? Now there's a court hearing. The judge will review the evidence, order a full accounting of the trust, and decide whether Tyler stays on as trustee or gets removed. If the judge finds that he misused funds, he'll have to pay it back. There could be other consequences too. Criminal charges? Possibly. David says it depends on how much was taken and whether the judge believes it was intentional. This is going to destroy us. Dad, we were already broken. This is just making it visible. He didn't argue. Didn't try to talk me out of it or appeal to family unity or tell me I was overreacting. He just said, I'm sorry you had to be the one to do this. It shouldn't have fallen to you. Someone had to. I know. But it should have been me. We sat in silence for a moment, the phone line crackling softly between us. Finally, he said, for what it's worth, I believe you. About the money. About what Tyler did. I don't know if that changes anything, but I wanted you to know. It changes everything, Dad. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried. Not from sadness or anger, but from relief. Because someone had finally said it. Someone had finally acknowledged that I wasn't crazy, wasn't vindictive, wasn't the problem. And that person was the one whose opinion had always mattered most. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. David said that was fast. That the judge must have seen something in the initial filing that warranted quick attention. In the meantime, Tyler was still technically trustee, but the court had frozen any new withdrawals pending the investigation. Mom had stopped calling me directly but was apparently conducting a campaign through every mutual acquaintance we had, painting me as unstable, jealous, and manipulative. Tyler had hired his own attorney, someone expensive from a downtown firm, and they were preparing their defense. Sophie called me one evening, her voice tight with anger. I just got a visit from Tyler's lawyer. They're trying to depose me, asking questions about my relationship with Tyler. Whether I have any grudges, whether I'm influencing you. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd go after you. I'm not. I told them everything. About how Tyler dumped me because I was in the way of his inheritance. About the conversations I overheard regarding the trust. About how your family made me feel like I wasn't good enough. She laughed. Turns out being erased makes you a very motivated witness. Did they threaten you? They tried. Implied I was bitter and unreliable. But I work with lawyers every day, Emma. I know how this works. And I've got my own documentation. Texts, emails, everything Tyler said to me about the money and the family and his plans. If they want to put me on the stand, I'll bury him. I felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we win. 2 weeks before the hearing, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Emma Richardson, this is Aunt Carol, your father's sister." I hadn't spoken to Aunt Carol in probably 5 years. She'd moved to Arizona after a falling out with my mother over something I'd never fully understood. Family gatherings were always tense when her name came up, my mother tight-lipped and dismissive, my father quietly sad. "Aunt Carol. Hi. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I wasn't expecting to call. But your father reached out to me. Told me what was happening with the trust and Tyler and all of it. Asked if I'd be willing to testify." Testify? About what? About your grandmother's intentions when she set up that trust. I was there when she did it, helped her with some of the decisions. She was very clear about what she wanted. That money was supposed to be protected, used only for medical expenses and then split evenly between you and Tyler after your parents passed. She made me promise I'd speak up if anyone ever tried to abuse it. My throat tightened. You'd be willing to testify to that? More than willing. Your grandmother loved you, Emma. She saw you, really saw you, in a way the rest of the family sometimes didn't. She worried about what would happen after she was gone, whether you'd be taken care of or taken advantage of. This trust was her way of making sure you had something that couldn't be taken away. Except it was. Except Tyler tried. But he didn't count on you fighting back. And neither did your mother. She paused. Linda's been calling me too, by the way. Asking me to stay out of it, to not get involved, to remember that Tyler's family. I told her I am involved and so is Tyler. And family means telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Mom's not going to forgive you for this. She hasn't forgiven me for a lot of things. I'll survive. Her voice softened. How are you holding up? I'm okay. Tired. Scared sometimes. But okay. Good. You're stronger than they gave you credit for. Your grandmother knew that. I'm glad you're finally showing them. After we hung up, I called David and told him about Aunt Carol. He was thrilled. Said having someone who could speak to the original intent of the trust was exactly what we needed to counter any arguments about family discretion or flexible interpretation. He scheduled a call with her for the following week to prepare her testimony. The days crawled by. I worked on design projects, met with clients, tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. But everything felt suspended, like I was holding my breath waiting for something to either break or resolve. Jess came over most evenings, sometimes with food, sometimes just with company. Sophie checked in regularly, sending me articles about trust law and financial abuse, building our shared understanding of what we were up against. And then, 5 days before the hearing, Tyler showed up at my apartment. I'd just gotten home from a meeting, was unlocking my door when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and there he was, hands in his pockets, looking exhausted and angry and something else I couldn't quite name. "We need to talk," he said. "I don't think that's a good idea. Your lawyer probably told you not to contact me." "I'm not here as a defendant, Emma. I'm here as your brother." "Those might be the same thing now." He flinched. "Can I come in?" 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I let him in. We stood in my small living room, awkward and tense, neither of us sitting down. He looked around, taking in the space like he was seeing it for the first time, even though he'd been here dozens of times before. "Nice place," he said finally. "Tyler, what do you want?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I want to understand why you're doing this. What you think you're going to accomplish. I want the truth to come out. I want you held accountable. I want the trust restored so Dad's medical care is actually protected." "It is protected. $12,000 says otherwise." "That was one expense. One time. Out of a trust worth over $200,000. One time that I know about. And it wasn't an expense, Tyler. It was a vacation. Your vacation. Using money that was supposed to keep Dad alive." I made a mistake, okay? I thought I was doing the right thing. Mom was falling apart, Dad was barely conscious, someone had to make decisions. So I did. And maybe I made some bad calls. But that doesn't make me a criminal. You forged a power of attorney. I didn't forge it. Dad signed it. While he was on morphine. While he could barely hold a pen. While he had no idea what he was agreeing to. Tyler's jaw tightened. You don't know what it was like. Being the one everyone was looking to for answers. Being the one who had to hold everything together while you were hiding in your apartment grieving something that happened 2 years ago. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt my breath catch, felt the old shame rise up. The voice that said he was right, that I'd been wallowing, that I'd made my pain everyone else's problem. But then I remembered Sophie's words. Struggling isn't the same as being unstable. Grieving isn't the same as being incompetent. I wasn't hiding, I said quietly. I was surviving. And then I was taking care of Dad. Alone. While you were in Barcelona. We offered to pay you. When, Tyler? When exactly did you offer to pay me? Because I've been going over every conversation we had, every text, every interaction, and I can't find it. What I found was you handing me 2 strollers worth of responsibility and telling me I'd be fine. He stared at me. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're mad about the trip. About not getting to go. This whole legal thing is just revenge. If it's just about the trip, then why are you so scared? If you didn't do anything wrong, why hire an expensive lawyer? Why threaten to expose my medical records? Why try to get Sophie to back down? Because you're trying to destroy me. I'm trying to get back what you stole. There's a difference. We stood there, staring at each other across my small living room, and I realized something. He genuinely didn't see it. Didn't understand why what he'd done was wrong. In his mind, he'd made hard choices during a difficult time, and I was punishing him for it. He couldn't see the pattern, couldn't recognize the way he'd been systematically prioritizing himself while expecting everyone else to sacrifice. You should go, I said. Emma, please. We can still fix this. Drop the case. We'll sit down as a family, figure out some kind of arrangement that works for everyone. You can even be added as a co-trustee if that makes you feel better. I don't want to be co-trustee, Tyler. I want you removed. Because you've proven you can't be trusted. His expression hardened. You're making a huge mistake. When this goes to court, we're going to prove that you're an unreliable witness with a history of emotional instability. We're going to show that you've been isolated, depressed, potentially delusional. We're going to make you look like exactly what you are, a bitter, jealous sister who can't handle the fact that some people are more capable than others. Get out. We're going to win, Emma. And when we do, you're going to be the one who destroyed this family. Not me. You. Get out of my apartment. He left. I locked the door behind him, leaned against it and let myself shake. Then I called David and told him everything Tyler had said. He listened carefully, asked a few questions, and then said, "That was incredibly stupid of him. He just gave us more evidence of intimidation and bad faith. Make sure you write down everything you remember from that conversation while it's still fresh." I did. Every word, every threat, every attempt at manipulation. And then I sent it to David and added it to the file that was growing thicker every day. The file that was going to show exactly who Tyler Richardson really was. The courthouse was exactly what I expected. Cold marble floors, high ceilings that swallowed sound, and the kind of institutional fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. I arrived 30 minutes early with David Chun, both of us carrying briefcases stuffed with documentation. He'd prepared me for this over the past 3 weeks, mock questioning sessions in his office where he played the opposing counsel, throwing aggressive questions at me until I learned to stay calm, to stick to facts, to not let emotion override truth. Sophie met us in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wore a navy suit I'd never seen before. Her hair pulled back, looking professional and composed. She squeezed my hand once, didn't say anything, just stood there as a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone in this. Aunt Carol arrived 10 minutes later, flying in from Phoenix the night before, staying at a hotel downtown because my mother had made it clear she wasn't welcome at the house. She hugged me tight, smelling like lavender and something distinctly her, and whispered, "Your grandmother would be proud." Tyler arrived with his lawyer exactly on time. Marcus Webb, a partner at one of Portland's most expensive firms, all silver hair and custom suits, and the kind of confidence that came from winning more often than losing. Tyler wouldn't look at me, just walked past with his eyes forward, his jaw set. My mother came in behind them alone. My father hadn't come. David had told me he'd been subpoenaed as a witness, that he'd have to testify about the power of attorney and the circumstances under which it was signed, but that he'd elected to wait outside until called rather than sit through the preliminary arguments. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Barbara Chan, no relation to my attorney, with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She reviewed the documents in front of her for a solid 5 minutes before looking up, surveying the room and saying, "This is a petition to remove Tyler Richardson as trustee of the Richardson Family Medical Trust and to conduct a full forensic accounting of all transactions made under his authority. Mr. Webb, I've reviewed your motion to dismiss. I'm denying it. We're proceeding with the hearing." Marcus Webb stood, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the petitioner has failed to demonstrate standing or present credible evidence of wrongdoing. This appears to be a family dispute being inappropriately channeled through the court system." "Mr. Chun, you want to respond to that?" David stood, calm and measured. "Your Honor, the petitioner is a named beneficiary of the trust in question and therefore has clear standing. As for evidence, we have bank statements, withdrawal records, communications between the trustee and financial institutions, and testimony from multiple witnesses regarding both the misuse of funds and the circumstances under which the respondent obtained his authority. This isn't a family dispute. It's a case of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult and breach of fiduciary duty." Judge Chen nodded. "That's what we're here to determine. Mr. Webb, call your first witness." Marcus Webb called Tyler to the stand. My brother walked up confidently, was sworn in, and sat down looking like someone who'd been wrongly accused and was here to set the record straight. Webb walked him through his credentials, his relationship with our father, the circumstances of the medical crisis that had led to him taking over the trust. "Mr. Richardson, can you explain to the court why you were named as trustee?" Tyler leaned forward slightly, earnest and serious. "My father had just undergone emergency cardiac surgery. He was incapacitated, unable to manage his own affairs. Someone needed to step in to make sure his medical bills were paid, that his care continued. I was the logical choice. I have experience in financial management, I live close enough to handle things quickly, and my father trusted me." "And did you take this responsibility seriously?" "Absolutely. Every decision I made was with my father's well-being in mind." "Let's talk about the withdrawal in question. $12,000, marked as a family medical travel expense. Can you explain that?" Tyler nodded. "My mother was on the verge of collapse. The stress of my father's illness was affecting her own health. Her doctor recommended that she take a break, get away from the situation temporarily so she could recover her strength. My father's cardiologist agreed that having a healthy, stable spouse would improve his recovery outcomes. So yes, I approved funds for her to take a therapeutic trip." "And you accompanied her on this trip?" "I did. Someone needed to be with her to make sure she was safe, to handle any emergencies that might arise. My sister Emma volunteered to stay with my father. It seemed like the best arrangement for everyone." Webb nodded, letting that sink in. "Now your sister has accused you of misappropriating funds. How do you respond to that?" "I think Emma is struggling. She's been through a lot in the past few years. A miscarriage, a difficult breakup, isolation, depression. She's on medication for anxiety and depression, has been hospitalized for suicidal ideation. I think she's looking for someone to blame for her pain, and I happen to be convenient." I felt David's hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm, to not react. I kept my face neutral, even as I heard my private medical history laid out like evidence of my incompetence. "Do you believe your sister is mentally stable enough to bring this case?" Objection. David was on his feet. The petitioner's mental health is not on trial here. The respondent's actions are. Sustained. Mr. Webb, stick to the facts of the trust management. Webb nodded. "No further questions, Your Honor." David stood for cross-examination. He approached the stand slowly, deliberately, carrying a folder. "Mr. Richardson, You testified that every decision you made was with your father's well-being in mind. Is that correct? Yes. And you characterized the $12,000 withdrawal as being for family medical travel expense. A therapeutic trip for your mother, recommended by doctors. That's correct. Can you provide documentation of these medical recommendations? A doctor's note, perhaps prescribing international travel? Tyler hesitated. It was a verbal recommendation. From which doctor? My mother's primary care physician. Name? Dr. Sandra Mitchell. David made a note. And your father's cardiologist who supposedly agreed this would help his recovery. Name? Dr. James Park. Thank you. Now, when you say the funds were used for a therapeutic trip, where exactly did this trip take place? Barcelona, Spain. 10 days in Barcelona. Business class flights. 5-star hotel. Is that correct? We wanted my mother to be comfortable. Of course. And these accommodations, this level of comfort, that was all medically necessary? It was important for her mental health. David nodded, flipping open his folder. I'd like to enter into evidence exhibits A through G. These are statements from Dr. Sandra Mitchell and Dr. James Park. Dr. Mitchell states she never recommended international travel for Linda Richardson. She suggested local counseling and possibly a weekend retreat within Oregon. Dr. Park states he was never consulted about any family travel and would not have recommended that Linda Richardson, who is not his patient, leave the country while her husband was in early cardiac recovery. I watched Tyler's face. Saw the moment he realized his lie had just been exposed. Saw him try to recalibrate to find another explanation. I may have misremembered the specifics of the conversations. You misremembered whether doctors recommended a European vacation? It was a stressful time. Details get blurred. I see. Let's talk about another detail. The power of attorney that granted you control over the trust. You testified that your father willingly signed it, that he understood what he was agreeing to. Is that accurate? Yes. And this was signed on March 15th, correct? I believe so. 2 days after his surgery, while he was still in the ICU, while he was on morphine, fentanyl, and several other pain medications. Is that also correct? He was lucid enough to understand. Was he? Because I have testimony from 3 nurses who were working that shift. All 3 state that Robert Richardson was barely conscious, was confused about basic facts like what day it was and where he was, and was in no condition to make legal decisions. I also have the hospital's own records showing his mental status assessment, which rated him as significantly impaired. Tyler's lawyer stood. Objection. The power of attorney was witnessed and notarized. It's a legal document. Which is why we're questioning the circumstances under which it was obtained, David replied. Your Honor, I'd like to call Robert Richardson to the stand. My father entered the courtroom slowly. He looked older than he had just weeks ago, more fragile, like this whole process had aged him. He was sworn in, sat down, and looked at Tyler with an expression I couldn't quite read. David approached gently. Mr. Richardson, do you remember signing a power of attorney document on March 15th? My father's voice was quiet. Not clearly, no. What do you remember about that day? Pain. Confusion. People coming in and out. My son telling me there was paperwork that needed to be handled. Did anyone explain to you what the power of attorney would allow Tyler to do? He said it was so he could pay my medical bills. Keep things running while I recovered. Did you understand that it would give him full access to your mother's trust? The ability to make withdrawals for any purpose he deemed appropriate? No, I didn't understand that. If you had understood that, would you have signed it? My father looked at Tyler, held his gaze. No, I would have waited until I was clear-headed, would have consulted my own attorney, would have set limits. Why didn't you do those things? Because I trusted him. He's my son. I didn't think I needed to protect myself from my own child. The courtroom was silent. Even Marcus Webb seemed to recognize that fighting against that statement would only make things worse. David continued. Mr. Richardson, were you aware that $12,000 from the trust was used to fund a vacation to Barcelona? Not until Emma told me. Tyler said it was for family medical expenses. I assumed that meant equipment, prescriptions, maybe a consultation with a specialist. If you had known the actual purpose, would you have approved it? No. Why not? Because that money was supposed to be protected. It was supposed to ensure that if my health declined again, if I needed treatment, there would be funds available. My mother set up that trust because she'd watched her own father die without proper care because the family ran out of money. She made me promise I'd protect it, use it only for what it was intended for. Using it for a vacation, while my daughter was home alone taking care of me, that's not what it was for. David nodded. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. No further questions. Marcus Webb stood for cross. Mr. Richardson, you love both your children, correct? Yes. And you want what's best for both of them? Of course. Is it possible that your daughter has influenced your perception of these events? That her own feelings about being left out of the trip have colored how you're remembering things? My father's voice was firm. My daughter showed me bank statements, showed me the withdrawal records, showed me emails between Tyler and the trust administrator. I'm not remembering things incorrectly. I'm seeing them clearly for the first time. Webb tried a few more angles, but my father didn't budge. When he finally stepped down, he walked past Tyler without looking at him and sat in the back of the courtroom. Next, David called Aunt Carol. She took the stand with the kind of calm authority that came from knowing you were telling the truth and having nothing to hide. David walked her through her relationship with my grandmother, her involvement in setting up the trust, the explicit conversations about its purpose. Mrs. Patterson, can you tell the court what your mother's intentions were when she established this trust? Aunt Carol nodded. She was very specific. The money was for Robert's medical care, and only medical care. She'd watched too many families lose everything to illness, watched people suffer because they couldn't afford treatment. She wanted to make sure that didn't happen to her son, and she wanted to make sure that after Robert and Linda passed, whatever was left would be split equally between Emma and Tyler. She made me promise I'd speak up if anyone ever tried to use it for anything else. Did she express any concerns about how the trust might be managed? She was worried about Linda. Thought Linda sometimes prioritized appearances over substance. And she was concerned about Tyler. She loved him, but she thought he was too focused on money, too willing to justify things if they benefited him. She specifically told me to keep an eye on things, to make sure Emma wasn't overlooked. Why Emma specifically? Because she saw how the family treated her. How Emma was always the one asked to sacrifice, to accommodate, to make things easier for everyone else. My mother worried that after she was gone, Emma would be taken advantage of. This trust was partly her way of making sure Emma had something that couldn't be taken away. Marcus Webb's cross-examination was brief. He tried to suggest that Aunt Carol was biased, that she had her own issues with the family, that her testimony was colored by personal grievances. But Aunt Carol didn't take the bait. She just calmly repeated what she'd said, adding that being estranged from Linda didn't change what her mother had told her, and having personal issues with the family didn't make the bank statements any less real. Then Sophie took the stand. She testified about her relationship with Tyler, about the conversation she'd overheard regarding the trust, about the calculation behind his decision to end their engagement. Marcus Webb tried to paint her as a scorned ex-fiancée with an axe to grind, but Sophie was ready for it. Mr. Webb, you're right that I have personal feelings about Tyler Richardson, but those feelings don't change what I heard him say. They don't change the emails he sent me about wanting to maximize his inheritance. They don't change the fact that he explicitly told me he needed to be free of spousal obligations before the trust came under his control. My feelings about being dumped don't alter facts. Finally, David called me. I walked to the stand feeling like I was moving through water, everything slow and heavy and surreal. I was sworn in, sat down, and looked out at the courtroom. Tyler staring at the table in front of him. My mother in the back row, her face a mask. My father with his hands folded, watching me with something that looked like sadness and pride mixed together. David started gently. Emma, can you tell the court about the 3 weeks you spent caring for your father after his surgery? I took a breath. I moved into my parents' house. I was there 24 hours a day. I managed his medications, monitored his vital signs, helped him with basic activities he couldn't do alone. I cooked food he could safely eat, made sure he attended all his follow-up appointments, coordinated with his nurses and doctors. There was a night when his heart rate spiked dangerously, and I had to call the on-call service. They talked me through what to do, and eventually his heart rate stabilized. But I was terrified the entire time that I was going to lose him. During this time, where were your mother and brother? In Barcelona. On vacation. Did they check in with you regularly? My mother called twice. Tyler sent one text asking how Dad was doing. I sent updates. I didn't hear back. How did you feel about being left alone with that responsibility? Objection, Webb said. Relevance. Your Honor, the respondent characterized the petitioner as volunteering happily for this arrangement. I'm establishing that characterization is false. Overruled. Answer the question, Ms. Richardson. I looked at Tyler. I felt abandoned. I felt used. I felt like I'd been handed the hard part while they got the reward. And when they came back tanned and happy, when Tyler handed me a keychain like that was adequate compensation, I felt invisible. When did you discover that trust funds had been used to pay for the trip? About a week after they returned. My father had asked me to organize his medical files for a new doctor. While I was doing that, I came across the trust statements. I saw the withdrawal. Saw Tyler's signature authorizing it. Saw it described as a medical travel expense. What did you do? I took pictures of everything. The statements, the emails, the power of attorney documents. And then I started asking questions. I called Tyler and asked about it directly. He told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand complex financial matters. Did anyone in your family acknowledge that what happened was wrong? My father did. Eventually. After I showed him the evidence. But my mother and Tyler, no. They told me I was being vindictive. That I was mentally unstable. That I was attacking the family. Marcus Webb's cross-examination was exactly what I'd been prepared for. He came at me hard, asking about my hospitalization after the miscarriage, about my medication, about whether I'd been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. He tried to paint me as someone whose judgment couldn't be trusted, someone who was acting out of emotion rather than reason. Ms. Richardson, isn't it true that you were hospitalized for suicidal ideation approximately 18 months ago? I was hospitalized after my miscarriage because I told my therapist I was having intrusive thoughts. I was evaluated, treated, and released. I've been in ongoing therapy since then. Having a mental health crisis doesn't make me incompetent. But it does affect your ability to assess situations rationally, doesn't it? No. It affects my emotional state. It doesn't affect my ability to read bank statements or recognize when someone has lied to me. You're upset about the trip, about not being included. Isn't this whole case really just about jealousy? If it were just about jealousy, I would have confronted them at dinner. I wouldn't have spent weeks gathering documentation, consulting attorneys, and building a legal case. This isn't about hurt feelings, Mr. Webb. It's about $12,000 being stolen from a medical trust. Stolen is a strong word. Misappropriated then. Misused. Taken without proper authorization for purposes that had nothing to do with the trust's intended use. Whatever word you prefer, the result is the same. The money is gone and it shouldn't be. But you can't prove that your brother acted with malicious intent, can you? I can prove he acted with self-interest. I can prove he lied about doctors' recommendations. I can prove he obtained power of attorney under questionable circumstances. Whether that intent was malicious or just selfish, I'll leave that to the judge to decide. When I stepped down, my legs were shaking. David caught my arm, steadied me, led me back to our table. Sophie squeezed my shoulder. Aunt Carol gave me a small nod. Judge Chun called a recess. We had 30 minutes while she reviewed all the evidence, all the testimony, all the documentation David had submitted. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, pale, but also somehow stronger than I remember being. Like something had solidified inside me during those hours on the stand. When we reconvened, Judge Chun didn't waste time. I've reviewed everything presented today. The testimony, the financial records, the medical documentation, the statements from the trust's original architect. This is a clear case of breach of fiduciary duty. Tyler Richardson used his authority as trustee to access funds for personal benefit, misrepresented the purpose of those withdrawals, and obtained his position of authority under circumstances that bring its validity into serious question. She looked directly at Tyler. Mr. Richardson, you are hereby removed as trustee of the Richardson Family Medical Trust, effective immediately. The court is appointing an independent trustee to manage the fund going forward. You are ordered to reimburse the trust for the $12,000 withdrawn for the Barcelona trip, plus interest. You are also ordered to pay all legal fees associated with this case. Tyler's face went white. Marcus Webb started to object, but Judge Chun held up a hand. I'm not finished. The power of attorney obtained on March 15th is hereby declared invalid due to the incapacitated state of the principal at the time of signing. Any actions taken under that authority after today are void. Additionally, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of all trust transactions made under Mr. Richardson's administration. If that audit reveals additional misappropriations, this court will reconvene to address them. She looked at me. Ms. Richardson, thank you for bringing this matter to the court's attention. It's clear that without your intervention, this exploitation would have continued unchecked. The trust will be restored, and your father's medical care will be properly protected going forward. She struck her gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted in quiet movement. David was shaking my hand, congratulating me, already talking about the next steps. Sophie hugged me tight, laughing with relief. Aunt Carol was wiping her eyes. Across the room, Tyler stood frozen, Marcus Webb speaking urgently in his ear. My mother rushed to Tyler's side, her face furious, looking at me like I'd just committed murder. My father walked over slowly. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug that smelled like his aftershave and something older, something that reminded me of being small and safe, and certain that the people who loved me would protect me. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I'm sorry I didn't do this myself, he said quietly. I should have been the one to stop him. You were sick, Dad. You couldn't. But I could have seen it coming. Could have been more careful about who I trusted. Your grandmother was right to worry. She'd be proud of you for telling the truth today. He nodded. She'd be prouder of you. Outside the courthouse, the October air was crisp and clean, the sky finally clear after days of rain. Sophie and Aunt Carol headed to lunch together, bonding over shared stories of being excommunicated from the Richardson family. David promised to send me all the final paperwork within the week, and reminded me that if the forensic audit turned up anything else, we'd be ready. My father offered to drive me home, but I declined. I needed to walk to feel the ground under my feet, to process everything that had just happened. He understood, hugged me again, and watched me go. I walked through downtown Portland, past coffee shops and bookstores and people living their normal lives, completely unaware that mine had just fundamentally shifted. I found a bench in a small park, sat down, and just breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. Not happy, not yet, but unburdened. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to put it down. My phone buzzed. A text from Jess. Verdict. I typed back. We won. Her response was immediate. Coming over tonight. Bringing champagne and terrible movies. No arguments. I smiled. No arguments. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from Tyler. You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it without responding. Because the truth was, I hadn't destroyed anything. I just stopped holding the broken pieces together and pretending they formed something whole. 3 weeks later, the forensic audit came back. It revealed 2 additional unauthorized withdrawals. One for $6,000, marked as family emergency funds, used to pay off Tyler's credit card debt. Another for $4,500, marked as medical equipment, used to buy a new television and sound system for his apartment. The total amount misappropriated was just over $21,000. Judge Chun reconvened the hearing. This time it was shorter. Tyler was ordered to repay the full amount plus penalties. The court also referred the case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. I didn't know if anything would come of that, but the threat was enough. Tyler was now living with the reality that his actions had consequences he couldn't charm or explain his way out of. My mother stopped speaking to me entirely. She'd send messages through my father occasionally, usually variations of "You've ruined everything. Or, I hope you can live with what you've done. I never responded. Some relationships I was learning weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to be survived. My father and I grew closer. He started coming over for dinner once a week, just the two of us, cooking simple meals and talking about things that had nothing to do with Tyler or the trust or the family drama. He told me stories about my grandmother, about what she'd been like when he was young, about the sacrifices she'd made to give him a better life. He apologized again for not seeing what was happening, for being too tired or too trusting or too conflict-averse to intervene. "I'm working on it," he said one evening, washing dishes in my tiny kitchen while I dried. "Being less passive. Standing up for things that matter. Your grandmother always said the worst sin wasn't doing wrong. It was seeing wrong and staying quiet. She sounds wise. She was. And she was right about you. She used to tell me, 'That girl sees everything. Make sure you're worthy of being seen.'" He handed me a plate. I wasn't. But I'm trying to be now. Sophie and I became real friends, the kind that came from surviving something together. She introduced me to her circle, social workers and advocates and people who'd spent their lives fighting for the vulnerable. I started taking on design projects for nonprofits, using my skills to help organizations that actually helped people. It felt good, purposeful, like I was building something that mattered. Aunt Carol stayed in touch, calling every few weeks to check in, sending care packages with terrible romance novels and good coffee. She told me stories about my grandmother, about the woman I'd been too young to really know, and I realized I'd inherited more from her than just a trust fund. I'd inherited her refusal to let wrong things go unchallenged. 6 months after the hearing, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Tyler, handwritten, 3 pages long. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was not an apology. It was an explanation, a justification, a defense of everything he'd done. He wrote about the pressure he'd felt, the expectations placed on him as the oldest child, the way he'd always been expected to be responsible and capable and in control. He wrote about how hard it had been watching our father get sick, how scared he'd been, how the trip had felt like the only way to escape the crushing weight of it all. He wrote about how hurt he was that I'd turned a private family matter into a public spectacle, how I'd ruined his reputation, his career, his relationship with our mother. He wrote about everything except the actual money, except the lying, except the fact that while he was feeling pressured and scared and overwhelmed, I'd been feeling all those things too while actually taking care of our father alone without stealing to fund an escape. I read the letter twice. Then I wrote a response. Not to send, but just to organize my thoughts, to say the things I needed to say even if he'd never hear them. "Tyler," I wrote, "I understand that you were scared. I understand that you felt pressure. But fear doesn't justify theft. Pressure doesn't excuse lies. You had options. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest about what you needed. You could have split the responsibility instead of dumping it all on me while you ran away. You made choices, and those choices hurt people. Hurt Dad. Hurt me. Hurt the trust that was supposed to protect our family. I didn't ruin your reputation. Your actions did. I just made sure those actions had consequences." I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and never sent it. Because he didn't need to read it. I just needed to write it. A year after the hearing, my father's health had stabilized. The new trustee, a professional fiduciary with no family connections, managed the trust carefully, making sure every expense was documented, every withdrawal justified. Dad's medical bills were paid on time. His medications were covered. His follow-up appointments happened without financial stress. The trust was functioning exactly as my grandmother had intended. Tyler paid back the money in installments. The district attorney declined to press criminal charges, citing the family relationship and the fact that restitution was being made. Tyler moved to Seattle for a fresh start, taking a job at a smaller firm where nobody knew about the trust or the hearing or any of. My mother went with him, leaving my father alone in the house they'd shared for 40 years. They were talking about divorce, he told me, but hadn't made any final decisions. I felt sorry for him but also relieved. He seemed lighter without her, more himself, like he'd been carrying her opinions and her priorities for so long he'd forgotten what his own looked like. One Sunday afternoon in late autumn, almost exactly a year after that train station moment that changed everything, my father and I drove out to my grandmother's grave. It was in a small cemetery outside of town, surrounded by Douglas firs and marked with a simple granite stone. We brought flowers, stood there in the rain, and I told her about everything that had happened, about the trust, the hearing, the victory, the cost. She would have told you to do exactly what you did, my father said quietly. She never backed down from a fight if the fight was worth having. Was it worth it? I asked. The family's broken. Mom won't speak to me. Tyler's gone. You're getting divorced. Was proving I was right worth all that? He thought about it for a while, rain dripping from the brim of his jacket. The family was already broken, Emma. We just pretended it wasn't. What you did, you exposed the cracks we'd all been stepping over for years. That's painful. But it's not the same as causing the damage. The damage was already there. We stood in silence for a while and then he said, Your grandmother used to tell me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who tell the truth, who choose to stay even when it's hard. By that measure, you're more family to me now than you've ever been. And I'm grateful. We drove home through the rain, stopping for coffee at a place we both liked, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. And I realized that losing the family I thought I had made room for the family I actually needed. The one that included Sophie and Jess and Aunt Carol and my father, imperfect and small but real, built on truth instead of obligation, held together by choice instead of guilt. That evening I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, started working on a new design project for a women's shelter, creating materials for their fundraising campaign. The work felt good, meaningful, like I was using my skills for something beyond just paying rent. Like I was building a life that reflected who I actually was instead of who I'd been told to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Dinner this week? There's someone I want you to meet. I smiled. I'd love that. Another text, this one from Jess. Movie night Friday? I'm thinking bad horror films and good wine. Absolutely. And one from my father. Thank you for today. For everything. I love you. I typed back. I love you too, Dad. I looked around my small apartment, at the prints on the walls and the half-finished projects on my desk, and the life I'd built from the pieces of the one that fell apart. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd imagined, but it was mine, earned through truth and courage, and the willingness to stand up, even when standing up meant standing alone. The greatest revenge I'd learned wasn't destroying the people who hurt you. It wasn't even making them face consequences, though that mattered too. The greatest revenge was refusing to become small to make them comfortable. It was choosing yourself, your truth, your dignity, even when that choice cost you everything you thought you needed. It was surviving them, and then building something better from what remained. 2 years had passed since the courtroom, since the moment everything shifted and the family I'd known reorganized itself into something unrecognizable. Time moved differently now, measured not in holidays and obligatory gatherings, but in small moments of genuine connection. Coffee with my father on Saturday mornings. Group dinners with Sophie and Jess where we'd laugh until our faces hurt. Quiet evenings alone in my apartment that felt peaceful instead of lonely. I'd changed jobs, left the corporate design work behind and started freelancing full-time for nonprofits and advocacy organizations. The pay was less predictable, but the work felt aligned with something deeper. Something that had crystallized during those weeks of organizing evidence and building my case. I'd learned that I was good at seeing patterns, at taking complicated information and making it clear and accessible. Those skills served me well in courtrooms, and they served me equally well helping organizations tell their stories. My apartment had changed too. I'd finally taken down the framed sonogram from the drawer where it had hidden for years. Not to display it, but to acknowledge it existed, to stop pretending that grief disappeared if you ignored it long enough. I'd packed it carefully in a memory box along with other remnants of that time, the hospital bracelet and the sympathy cards and the journal I'd kept during those dark months. Then I'd put the box on a shelf in my closet where it could exist without consuming my daily life. The loss was still there, would always be there, but it had become part of my history instead of my entire identity. Sophie had become one of my closest friends, the kind where you could call at 2 a.m. or show up unannounced and it was never an imposition. She'd introduced me to her partner, a woman named Rachel who worked in environmental law, and the three of us had formed our own small chosen family. We celebrated birthdays and watched terrible television together and showed up for each other in the ways that mattered. Sophie told me once that I'd saved her by calling that day, but the truth was we'd saved each other. She'd given me permission to fight back, and I'd given her validation that what happened to her had been real and wrong. My relationship with my father had deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without my mother's influence, without the constant pressure to maintain appearances and keep peace, he'd become more himself. He'd started painting again, something he'd done in college but abandoned decades ago. His house was filled with canvases now, abstract pieces in blues and grays that somehow captured the complexity of healing. He joined a support group for people recovering from cardiac events, had made friends with other survivors, had built a life that didn't revolve around managing other people's expectations. We talked more honestly now, about my grandmother, about his regrets, about the ways he'd failed to protect me from the family dynamics that had slowly eroded my sense of self. He'd apologized more times than necessary, and I'd learned to accept those apologies without minimizing what had happened. Yes, he'd been sick. Yes, he'd been manipulated. But he'd also made choices, and part of healing was acknowledging that reality without letting it define our current relationship. Tyler and I hadn't spoken since the letter. He'd moved to Seattle married, someone I'd never met, and from what I gathered through occasional updates from my father, had built a carefully curated life where the trust fund incident was never mentioned. My mother lived with them, helping with their new baby, apparently content in a world where I simply didn't exist. My father would occasionally mention them, always carefully, always watching my face to see if it hurt. Sometimes it did. Not because I missed them, but because I grieved the family I'd thought we were, the connection I'd believed existed beneath the dysfunction. But mostly I felt free. Free from the obligation to make them comfortable. Free from the constant calculation of how to be enough without being too much. Free from the exhausting work of managing everyone's emotions while ignoring my own. I'd started dating again cautiously with the help of therapy and the support of friends who actually wanted me to be happy. Nothing serious yet, just dinners and conversations and the slow process of learning to trust that someone could see all of me and not find it burdensome. It was harder than I'd expected. Unlearning the patterns that said my needs were inconvenient, that taking up space was selfish, that being loved meant being useful. But I was trying. One evening in March, my father called with unexpected news. He'd been contacted by a journalist writing a piece about financial exploitation of the elderly, about how family members often abuse positions of trust. They'd found the public records from our case and wanted to interview him, to use our story as an example of how these situations could be resolved through legal action. He was calling to ask if I'd be comfortable with that, if having our experience made public again would hurt me. I thought about it for a long time. About the shame I'd initially felt, the fear of judgment, the worry that people would see me as vindictive or damaged or difficult. But then I thought about the number of people who might be in similar situations, who might be questioning their own perceptions, who might need permission to speak up. I think you should do it, I told him. Maybe it'll help someone else recognize what's happening to them. He did the interview. The article came out a month later in a regional magazine, thoughtfully written and carefully researched. It didn't sensationalize our story or turn anyone into a villain. It just laid out the facts, the pattern of behavior, the legal remedies available, the importance of documentation and outside support. The journalist had interviewed David Chun as well, and Aunt Carol, and even reached out to Sophie, who'd spoken about the broader pattern she'd observed in Tyler's behavior. The response was overwhelming. My father received dozens of emails from people who'd read the article and recognized their own situations. Adult children who'd been manipulated into giving up control of family finances. Siblings who'd discovered trust funds being drained. Elderly parents who'd signed documents they didn't understand while recovering from medical procedures. Each message was a variation on the same theme. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was going crazy. Thank you for speaking up. I received messages too, forwarded through the journalist who'd offered to pass them along. Most were supportive, thanking me for my courage, telling me I'd done the right thing. A few were critical, accusing me of destroying my family over money, suggesting I should have handled it privately. Those stung briefly, until I reminded myself that the people writing them didn't have all the information and weren't entitled to it. They were projecting their own fears about family conflict onto my situation, and their discomfort wasn't my responsibility to manage. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Patricia, about my age, who'd been in a nearly identical situation with her brother and her father's estate. She'd stayed silent, had let the misappropriation continue because she didn't want to cause problems, didn't want to be seen as difficult. Now, 10 years later, the entire estate was gone. Her father was in a state-funded nursing home because there was no money for private care, and her brother was living in a house purchased with funds that should have been protected. "I wish I'd had your courage," she wrote. "I wish I'd known it was possible to fight back. My father died thinking I didn't care enough to protect him, when the truth was I cared too much about keeping the family intact. I traded his dignity for my comfort, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I read that message 3 times, feeling the weight of what hadn't happened in her life, the parallel universe where I'd made the same choice she had. And I realized something important. The fight hadn't just been about the money or even about justice. It had been about refusing to participate in my own erasure. It had been about saying clearly and publicly that I mattered, that my labor mattered, that the truth mattered more than the appearance of family harmony. That summer, Sophie got married to Rachel in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside the city. I was one of the bridesmaids, standing up there in a dress we'd picked out together, watching 2 people who actually saw each other commit to building a life based on truth and mutual respect. During the reception, Sophie pulled me aside, slightly drunk on champagne and happiness, and said, "You know this wouldn't have happened without you, right? I was so stuck in the narrative that I wasn't enough, that I'd been the problem. You calling me, believing me, fighting back against your own family, it showed me I deserved better than being erased. So thank you for everything." I hugged her tight, feeling the way healing could ripple outward, how one person's courage could give someone else permission to want more from their life. My father came to the wedding too, bringing a painting he'd made as a gift, an abstract piece in greens and golds that somehow captured the feeling of new beginnings. He and Sophie talked for a long time at the reception, and later he told me it had been good to hear her perspective, to understand more fully what Tyler had done and why it mattered that I'd intervened. "I'm proud of you," he said, standing with me in the vineyard as the sun set and the party continued behind us. "Not just for the trust thing, though that took real strength, but for building this." He gestured vaguely at the gathering, at Sophie and Rachel and Jess and all the other people who'd become my chosen family. "For not letting what happened make you bitter or closed off. For staying open to connection even after you learned how badly it could hurt." "I had good examples," I said. "Grandmother, from what you've told me. Aunt Carol. You eventually." He smiled. "Better late than never, I suppose." In the fall, I took on a project that felt like it had been waiting for me. A legal aid organization focused on elder abuse asked me to design a comprehensive guide for family members navigating situations like mine, a resource that would walk them through recognizing financial exploitation, gathering evidence, understanding their legal options, and preparing for the emotional fallout. I threw myself into it, interviewing attorneys and social workers and people who'd been through similar cases, compiling everything I'd learned into something that might help others avoid the confusion and isolation I'd experienced. Working on the guide meant revisiting all of it, the bank statements and the court hearings and the messages from family members accusing me of betrayal. It was harder than I'd expected, like pressing on a bruise that hadn't fully healed. But it was also clarifying, helping me see how far I'd come, how much I'd learned about my own capacity for resilience. The guide was published in January, distributed through legal aid offices and elder advocacy organizations across the state. My name was on it as the designer and a contributing writer. It felt good, seeing something tangible come from all that pain, knowing that the worst experience of my life might make someone else's journey slightly less difficult. Around that time, I got an unexpected call from Tyler. His number appeared on my phone one evening, and I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, my heart racing with a complicated mix of curiosity and dread. "Emma." His voice was different than I remembered, quieter, less certain. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from." "That's accurate. I wanted you to know that I read the article, the one Dad was interviewed for, and I've been thinking about it a lot." I waited, not offering anything to make this easier for him. "I was wrong," he said finally. "About the trust. About how I handled everything. About what I said to you and how I treated you. I told myself at the time that I was making hard decisions under pressure, that I was doing what needed to be done. But the truth is I prioritized my own comfort over Dad's security and your well-being. And I'm sorry. The apology landed strangely, like something I wanted desperately 2 years ago, but wasn't sure I needed anymore. Okay. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I took from you or make up for the things I said. But I wanted you to hear it anyway. Tyler, can I ask you something? Why now? Why call now after 2 years of silence? He was quiet for a moment. Because I have a daughter now. And I keep thinking about what kind of person I want her to grow up to be. What kind of example I'm setting. And I realized that if she ever found out what I did, if she ever read that article or heard the story, I'd be ashamed. I'd be teaching her that it's okay to use people, to take advantage of family, to justify wrong actions because they benefit you. And that's not who I want to be for her. That's good, I said carefully. I'm glad you're thinking about that. Would you ever want to talk? Not now necessarily, but someday. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to rebuild what we had. I don't want her to grow up without knowing her aunt. Without having the chance to know you. I felt tears start, unexpected and complicated. I don't know, Tyler. Maybe someday. But not yet. I'm still healing from what happened. And I need to protect that healing even if it means maintaining distance. I understand. That's fair. He paused. For what it's worth, you were right. About all of it. The trust, the power of attorney, the way we treated you. You were right. And I'm sorry it took me this long to admit it. We said goodbye, and I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time afterward, processing the conversation. Part of me felt vindicated, finally hearing him acknowledge what he'd done. Part of me felt sad, mourning the brother I thought I had, the relationship that might have been possible in a different family with different patterns. And part of me just felt tired, ready to be done carrying this story, ready to move forward into whatever came next. I called my father and told him about the conversation. He listened carefully, then said, "You don't owe him anything, you know. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not a relationship with his daughter. Whatever you decide, I'll support it." I know. I'm not sure what I want yet. That's okay too. You don't have to decide today or even this year. You can just sit with it until you know. That felt right, leaving it unresolved but acknowledged. Like so many other things in my life now, not everything needed immediate closure. Some things could just exist in the complicated middle space, neither forgiven nor actively resented, just there. Spring came again, marking 3 years since the train station moment that started everything. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, working on designs for a domestic violence shelter's fundraising campaign, when I looked up and saw my reflection in the window. And for the first time in years I recognized myself. Not the version of me that had bent and accommodated and made myself small. Not the broken version from after the miscarriage. But someone new, forged from all of it, stronger and clearer and more certain of her own worth. I thought about everything that had happened, everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The family relationships that had ended and the new ones that had formed. The career I'd left behind and the work I'd found. The version of myself I'd thought I needed to be and the person I'd actually become. And I realized that the revenge wasn't in the courtroom victory or Tyler's apology, or even in building a better life. The revenge was in surviving with my integrity intact. In refusing to let their treatment of me determine my worth. In learning that being loved wasn't about being convenient, and that the people who couldn't see me clearly didn't deserve the privilege of my presence. The greatest revenge was becoming someone I was proud to be. Someone my grandmother would have recognized. Someone who took up space without apology and told the truth without shame. Someone who knew that family wasn't just blood but choice, wasn't just obligation but genuine care. Someone who understood that healing sometimes looked like walking away, and that closure sometimes meant accepting you'd never get the apology you deserved, but building a life worth living anyway. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee and walked out into the spring afternoon. The air smelled like cherry blossoms and fresh rain. And somewhere in the distance I could hear music playing, life continuing in all its complicated, messy, beautiful ways. I had dinner plans with Sophie and Rachel, a project deadline approaching, a phone call scheduled with Aunt Carol later that week. I had a life full of people who chose me, work that mattered, and a future that was mine to build however I wanted. And that, more than any courtroom victory or forced apology, felt like winning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.